But if anything, on all accounts, interest rates are saying the outlook for interest rates are really low as well.
All righty.
Michael Burgio. Are you on Facebook? Yes. Oh, Facebook. There you go.
Welcome, everyone. Morning Minutes with myself, Michael Burgio, Mark Novak. Episode 214. We are powering along this morning. We're talking about interest rates. What are they? What does it mean for the real estate market in good way, bad way? It is definitely a phrase and one of the most talked about topics. And sometimes if you want to know what the property market's going to do in 3 months, there's very good arguments to look at what interest rates are doing right now. Mark, just for the idiot's guide of interest rates, what is interest rates? Who sets it? Is it give us a bit of a dummy's version of it for the people out there, or someone who's 17 who has no idea what?
Billy. Let's do it for Billy from Novak, Billy the kid that comes in on holidays. Okay, so will you borrow money from someone? They generally don't do it for free. So they will ask for the money back over a long period, and they'll ask for some money on top of that, interest. And basically interest rates have you got that graph there?
Yes, I'll bring it up now.
So interest rates historically, now where people get it wrong is they always think the banks,
big bad banks,
the big bad banks are inevitably responsible. But believe it or not, banks are only ever taking a clip on the interest rate, which is very interesting, guys. I'm going to come to that in a second.
I got it up. So there's a bit of a delay for people, but you know what?
Okay, so,
then for Instagram folks, I'm going to turn the camera around.
So kind of you. Look at that. Good job.
14-day trial in the middle of it, but anyway.
What's a 14-day trial thing for? Oh, you got to exit out. Okay, guys. All right, so one, we know what interest rates are. They're your repayment. I'm going to talk about analysing where we think the property market's going in a second. But I think it's just really important to mention to people what year was that? How long was this graph over?
The first date is 1989, and that was about 14%.
All right. So now this is the official cash rate. So where people actually get upset with banks is they think the banks are gouging and profiteering all of this margin. But the banks, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am, but the banks only ever have an overrider. I think it's of about 2%, 3% overrider. On top of that, sometimes even 1 or 2% overrider on top of that official cash reserve bank. So the Reserve Bank of Australia is setting this cash rate, this interest rate, and then what the banks do is put the overrider on top. Now, what then us consumers do is we go and borrow the money at the RBA official rate plus the bank rate on top, and that's the advertised rates that we all see on the internet, in the newspaper and stuff on the television. That's what we see. Now, what's really interesting, there's a little pop up again. That little thing's a bugger, eh? Where'd it go?
Yeah, I changed it back to us.
Oh, can I just point something out on that?
Yep.
So let's bring it up again. So what's really interesting, guys, with this interest rate is if you look historically what the RBA does. So that's cash rate. Go down further. Well,
fixed and variable.
Fixed versus variable. Let's go down a bit further. All on a downward trajectory. I think that's it, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go back to that top one, guys. So when you're looking at these interest rates, the official cash rate, the Reserve Bank is obviously a government institution, body, or whatever you call it. So it's regulated by our government. And what you can see, and when it jumps up and down like that, it's often in sync with cycles in the economy. So what the government actually does is they leverage these cash rates down and up in order to stimulate or slow down our economy and or our property market. So when you go back to that graph again, we are at an all-time low now with interest rates. So what does that mean, Mr. Burgio, to you? What does this graph mean to you, buddy?
I was just going to bring up a graph for Sydney property prices, see if I can have that next to it. Basically, I feel they use interest rates are definitely a way that the market can be slowed down or sped up, basically, depending what the goals are for the economy and what we're in need. We clearly saw this end of 2017 when we had a property market surge of like 30, 40% in a very, very short period of time. It was probably just under 2 years, went up 40%. So, and they needed to slow that down because it's just not sustainable. Your one bedroom unit, everyone always argues for affordability. And if that kept going, it definitely would not have been affordable. So interest rates but the way I interpret interest rates at the moment is the economy isn't strong and we need money going through it. And and we're incentivizing people beyond ever. They're making it so good and too good to be true. So property buy. One, because if you're buying property, you're in that believer, like that's the long-term path, and it's a great way to create wealth. So they're incentivizing people to do so much, because when you buy property, you spend money on a lawyer, you renovate, it's just got this beautiful chain reaction for our economy. And also when people are building in the construction industry, we need that ticking along, and people need to buy those units, and people aren't going to build units if they're not going to sell the units. So you need both moving along. So
and people can look after themselves when they retire. So if the government gets young people, kids into property early, and that achieves great capital growth over 30 to 40 years, when they retire, they're going to be less dependent on pension.
Well, look at it this way. You've got your super ticking along. So if you buy at 25, most loan terms are 30 years long, or 30 years short, you could say, in a great... so that means you're going to be 55, 60, retired, own the property outright. Even if it doesn't go up, that's $500,000 on top of your super. I don't know what... Tax-free. Like, I imagine most people retire with maybe $200,000-300,000 in super, Mark. So to be able to have $500,000 tax-free, that's almost more than your whole super. And that's why they're really incentivizing people to do to get into property, because you will become less dependent on the government if you have this nest egg. So right or wrong, I think we're going to have a growth in the property market just because the barriers to get in are so small. Like even if you look at you used to have a 20-30% deposit. That was a barrier. Now it's 5%. So interest rate, the mortgage repayment, you may have the deposit, Mark, but you can't afford the weekly repayments because interest rates were 9%. If they're 2%, that's 4 times as much. So in theory, it's basically, instead of paying $300 a week, you may be paying $700. That barrier is now $300. So that barrier is gone. You've even got the the penalty insurance for only having a 5% deposit. Because to be honest, you've always been able to get a loan with 5%, but they've just whacked you with mortgage insurance. Now the government's saying if you're a first home buyer and you tick these boxes, you won't get hit with that. That's another barrier. So the barriers are just coming down for people to buy property. Luke's on. Chad, good morning. Super Saturday. Let's go. Luke said, are we the dummies? I think because we said Idiot's Guide. No, Mark and I are the dummies. So if we're the dummies.
So
if we get it,
interest rates is what we're talking about this morning. They're at an all-time historic low. The government's throwing around $300 or $400 billion to keep the economy pumping. the government via the Reserve Bank is keeping interest rates low. The forecast for interest rates are low. Like if you fix your interest rate, you can potentially do very, very well on a rate. Like I saw Christian Stevens wrote something as a mortgage broker. There's a $4,000 incentive on refinancing as well.
Yes.
I see the banks are profiteering a little bit more by pushing the whole concept of fixed term rates, because the banks make a little bit more margin. If they get their calculations right and they factor in increase their margin more, that gives them a right to charge a higher interest rate. So often the banks are charging a slightly higher interest rate for fixed. But what's really interesting at the moment with interest rates is they're actually sitting a little bit lower than the variable. So I reckon if I'm punting with the banks, that interest rates could come down a little bit more, because that's where the fixed rates are. They're down a little bit more.
Yeah, I think they will. And with that in mind, I think there's going to be there's some great opportunities in buying for the next 6 to 12 months. Now, how often do they look at interest rates, Mark? When does the Reserve Bank?
Every second Tuesday, the second Tuesday of every month, monthly.
Yep. Okay.
It may be very interesting. They do use it as a tickler. They really use it as a tickler. But if you look at how much the government regulates the property market, I think we all really, really underestimate how they regulate this property market by way of incentives, by way of interest rates. Everybody thinks the banks are setting the interest rates. The banks are profiteering. But it's only that margin the bank's got over and on top of the cash rate. Everything else is going back to the house. So tell me.
Let's not. They are still profiting a lot, but it's not as much as people think. You're right.
Well, it's 100% profit. It's good. It's
a lending service.
It's a lending. It's a nice way. You don't actually have to provide. It's not like it's goods and services are a bit easy to provide when it's money, I reckon. Jesus.
Yeah, you're exactly like debt's a big business. Who controls the debt controls.
It's huge. Now, so guys, what are the things when we're indexing interest rates back to the property market? What are the things that a consumer, that a buyer really cares about or influences in purchasing a property? So what are the things that actually rally the property market, and what are the things that kill the property market? I would have thought interest rates would have been number one.
I reckon interest rates are the biggest one on a mass scale, because I think people's sentiment is attached to interest rates. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong with how their sentiment is, because we know right now they're trying to give the sentiment everything's all okay with these, look at how good these low rates are, buy. And for the specific transaction of property, it is okay, it's great. But then obviously externally in the economy. But I think sentiment is the biggest thing that is controlled with interest rates. What's another one, Mark?
Economy. Which I think index. It's really funny. All this stuff indexes back to what you just said, sentiment. So the interest rate creates that sentiment in a purchaser's mind. The economy, which I guess economy is also jobs. That ties into that as well. Ability to get a deposit, ability to pay stamp duty or upfront costs.
Another one. Interest rates being so low, one, it stimulates people to buy because the rate's low, but it also pushes people to takes money out of fixed terms.
What does that mean?
And put it into something else that's generating a higher yield. Up until probably the last 10 years, you actually could make a nice passive income with term deposits. But the last 10, especially the last 2 or 3, it's basically been like, there's no point having your money in a term deposit. So by interest rates being so low and that rate coming back, because it doesn't just affect the interest on the loan, it also affects the positive interest on the money held with the bank. And if you're not getting anything or very minimal, you're going to look for areas to put your money into that makes more than a 0.1% on your $1 million cash. You're going to go buy a commercial property and maybe generate $60,000 a year rather than $1,000 a year. So they are I reckon that there's a direct correlation as well. Lower interest rates, the lower the payouts, the more that goes into the property market. That's a big one. Fixed term deposits, they'll be getting lower and lower, the value is held.
Oh, it's unbelievable. And look, what we're talking about this morning, guys, is interest rates for dummies. We are the dummies just trying to work out what's our take of it. Look, we're not financial advisors. We're not accountants. This is not advice, but it's really what you and I see other people do out there. And it's we just have a bit of a chin wag about it, because you know what? When you go to a barbecue, everyone's got their opinion, and you know, throwing that around is really, really interesting at the moment, because at the end of the day, it all summates and all adds up to that what we were saying before, that sentiment. Wrong or right, whether you got your information wrong or right about the economy, about jobs, about grants, about interest rates, it's whatever the mass economy or the mass market's feeling. And I think people at the moment are feeling pretty confused.
100%. And Michelle, very informative, Michael and Mark, making it clear for everyday punter. Thank you. That's what we try and do. Thank you for watching, Michelle. What else, Mark? I'm trying to think now. Interest rates, the barriers going in. I think the biggest one is sentiment. When we look at property, it's very emotional, isn't it? It's always a threat of it crashing, and then when it's a very emotional whole thing, and everything's about your feelings.
It's animal instinct.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, whether it's in a relationship, whether it's in a financial decision, whether it's in whatever the hell you do with, you know, it's that animal instinct. It's that emotion. Yeah, it's huge.
But I will say, you've been doing this a lot longer than I have, like a lot longer. But in my very short 8 years, there's always this threat of it crashing and going down 30, 40, 50.
I can't believe you've only been in property for that amount of time only. And you've just achieved so much.
Thank you. And with all your experience, but it's always the same story. It's about next quarter, it's going down 40%. It's crashing. We've reached the bubble. We've reached the bubble. I remember seeing an article, I'll post it. It was an article in 1984, which basically said the buckle was going to burst. And then in 2019, it said the same thing. You've been doing this a lot longer, but has it always been like this? And I think, do you think it will ever change?
No.
Yeah.
There's always, you know, look, we love talking about interest rate. We love talking about first-time buyers. We love talking about property prices. We just love talking about it. You know, it's a story up, it's a story down. It's just always a story. But you know what's really interesting with interest rates?
Yes.
Interesting with interest rates. Interesting. Interesting with interest rates is, if like, just have a real hard think, guys. Cut all the bullshit away of what you know today from the paper and the news. Imagine 5 years ago you said, hey, this is what the curve of interest rates is going to look like. Imagine 10 years ago if I said, hey, this is what the curve of interest rates is going to look like. And imagine 15 years ago if we said the same thing. Like, I would have looked at that and thought, oh my God, buy up, quick, buy up, money cheap. And for landlords are taking it on the chin a little bit with rents.
Yes.
But when you look at these interest rates, you know, net for a landlord, who cares?
Yeah, it's true, especially residential. It's a long game. It's a capital growth game. And I'm just looking at that graph now, like the lowest we ever had it was near 2008 GFC, and we're smashing, and that was 3%. and that came from 7%.
Can we finish off on that graph again? That is such a sexy graph.
Yep. And I'll
Guys
screenshot it from the
and
comments.
guys and girls, I just want you to remember, please read up on this story on the interest rates, which is what inspired us today. But ladies and gentlemen, and I know it all comes back to that animal instinct, it all comes back to sentiment. Perception, like I said the other day, is the
Perception,
art of war.
Ooh, well said.
War.
Well said.
So, if you look at that graph that's on Facebook at the moment, guys and girls, if you looked at these interest rates 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, wow, what a time to borrow some money. It is good. It is exciting. And I don't care how much of an idiot you are, Michael Burgio, or I am, or the people watching out there are. That's one hell of a sexy graph.
Yep. All righty. Anything else you want to add, Mark? We've got Super Saturday today. You got breakfast at Novak at 8:30 kicking off with
breakfast at Novak. Meet the team, chat with the team, see what we're all up to. It's rainy. It's holidays. It's holiday season for a lot of people out there.
Yeah, it's school holidays. Apparently
it is. Hey, one other thing we're going to do, guys, keep an eye out for this on our next show. Coming on our next coming shows is stockpiling your money. Yep. I was reading an incredible article about people saving money in the last 12 weeks and not spending it and whacking it in their savings account. Very, very interesting story.
All righty. Look forward to it. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Good luck, everyone. Bye-bye.
Have a great day, Sea Legend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Your head looks like a little ball on the bottom of Facebook there.
Yeah, I saw that. I should zoom in a bit more.
See ya.